Thank you very much to Mark N for being one of my newest patrons and helping to keep the channel going. So if you'd like to do the same, you can do so over at patreon.com/TJOmega. I ask as little as $1 a month for a whole bunch of rewards, shoutouts, access to Patreon and exclusives, and everyone contributes to how many live streams I do every month just by pitching $1. Yeah, that's kind of how that works. So, for that help, I need to start doing reviews. So let's do one. Oh, it's time, boys and girls. Oh, it's time. So I'm still going on with the Earthrise review week, and I'm at the most controversial release of the first wave. And, I didn't mean to do this, but the framing is still set up for Hoist, who I just finished reviewing, so it makes the fact that Cliffjumper is so tiny, by comparison, all the more hilarious when I put it in frame. But we're going to be keeping it in my hands for most of the review, so we're not going to worry too much about what it looks like when it's on the table. So yes, Earthrise Cliffjumper, and this was an exciting release, but also very contentious one. So when I did my top 10 Transformers who need a new toy, I made a strong argument for Cliffjumper being very high on the list because he hasn't had a new mold that was all his own since Generation 1. Don't tell me about Prime, that's a different universe, different design, different character. I'm looking for G1 Cliffjumper, and now we finally got one. Let's talk about him because he has issues. So we have this fully detailed vehicle mode. It's a nice little sports car, very akin to his G1 toy if it was stretched out, which is appropriate because the real-world car that he was based on was squished down in order to create the mini-bot we all know and tolerate. I'm kidding, I love Cliffjumper. So, we also have a lot of detail going into him, so you would expect that. They make up for the size with the detail. A lot of black on the back, but translucent blue windshields all the way around, so he doesn't have that problem that Hoist did. Painted rims once again, nice and silver. In the front, black around the front, and then little bits of detail for a little bit of silver for the grille and the turn signals. In the back, the exhausts have been molded in, the bumper has been painted black. He's got a lot of little detail parts going on, and then big bold Autobot symbol there on the front, along with some G1 accurate designs, even if the vehicle mode looks a little bit unfamiliar. So, yeah, it's an extremely nice rendition of his G1 vehicle if it was a little bit more accurate to how it looked in the real world, and then changed a little bit for copyrights reasons. So, yeah, I'm actually quite happy with him, aside from, yes, he is very small. Now, to make up with that, they did include the largest accessory of the deluxes in this big thing. Now, we can just attach it to the roof and just give him this massive cannon on top. We're going to save the real look at the cannon until we get into the robot mode. But for now, we are going to dismantle it because they did do something really cool with this. So all of the parts come off, even the little bipod for, I guess you're going to snipe with your bazooka. And then they allow us to play around a little bit. So I'm going to unfold this and create, I guess, some kind of little exhaust on the back. It's going to peg in down here, and then these two little pegs are going to go right there. So that creates that, whatever that is. I think it's just to store it, really. Now, these little tabs are going to go into the handles. I prefer to keep the wide section toward the back, just because that's where the effect works the best, especially if you want to peg in effect parts onto these 5mm ports. And then on the front, we're going to peg in the bipod as little skis that are going to go underneath his front wheels. And with that done, we get a little bit of an aquatic mode, a little bit of surfing mode. Now, this is how they got to Dinobot Island on little skis and thrusters, because that's still when Autobots had no way of flying there, mostly because the cartoon wasn't allowed to use Jetfire at the time. That's a long, long story. But yeah, point being, this is actually accurate, cartoon accurate. This is how Cliffjumper looked in an episode. So it's a really cool little touch, to have a transforming weapon that gives him this little alternate mode. It's a cute little thing. And there's actually more significance to the cannon than that, the bazooka rather, so we're going to go into it when we get to the robot mode. And I guess that's coming up soon. Hang on. To be very careful, because those are very tiny pegs. Down the clip from there. All right, so those parts out of the way. Let's transform him. And this is where we have to start talking about some things. So the transformation starts by removing the rear section of the vehicle mode. I really wish there was a way of sugarcoating this. I really do. But basically, yes, you take the rear section, you pop it out of his robot mode hands, and you set it aside. He is part forming, ladies and gentlemen. 2020, we finally get a new Cliffjumper, and he is guilty of some pretty egregious part forming. We're going to talk about that a little bit, which might make this review way too long for how simple this toy is, but for the most part, yeah, a lot of people aren't happy with it. So we're going to continue the transformation. I got to get a few panels unpegged here, so we can start folding things out. This one is a little bit, this one's a little bit tricky for me to transform, so we're going to just unclip some things and then just fold it together once everything is nice and open. So all of that splits open like so. What we're looking to do here is to get these panels down and then flip the legs out. So there's the pelvis section that we just took out. And then these all fold over to create the upper part of the body, which is actually kind of a cool way of doing away with these wheels altogether. Let's see. And then, hang on. You rotate around, and it's important to note that the rotation is up here, which is just a little bit odd. So get those down. From here, we fold the wheels down. That gives us the room to fold these back, and then the extra panel pegs into the wheel to hold that in place. So once again, wheel down, and then fender down, and then in like so. So that gives us that. We can open up the chest. That folds away that panel. Then rotate everything around. You can get the hands, you can get the transformation to work no matter how you have the arms arranged back there, but you know, sometimes they end up a little bit backwards. And then, yes, we take that panel, flip out the little black peg, and then we just stick it back on. Part forming, you know, at its finest. And that gives us our Cliffjumper, our first modern Cliffjumper that was never, ever a Bumblebee. His first mold that is all his own since G1, which is embarrassing for a character who's actually kind of important to the mythos and history of the Transformers. We'll get into that here in a little bit. But for the most part, yeah. That's the size, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to do what I did last time, and we're going to bring in the previous deluxe reviews in order to give you a size comparison. Here's Wheeljack, who's about standard size for Siege, and then we're going to look at Hoist. Yeah, these are all $20 each. Figure that one out for me. This is the problem when you don't have a smaller size class to go to. You don't have like a legend size class where a smaller character can actually fit comfortably. I honestly feel like Cliffjumper should have been like immediately remolded into Bumblebee, and they should have been 2-packed. Something. Because, yeah, he doesn't feel $20 in the least. You know, I get bigger toys on third party paying $20. It's actually kind of not true, but still, you get my point. He's super tiny, and that is problematic. I will say it's not the first time. Back in RID, the smallest of the Autobot construction vehicles for the landfill team was Wedge, and he was extremely tiny for a deluxe back then. This is definitely smaller. It's a little bit more extreme than that. So, yeah. It's disappointing. I will say he is sculpted beautifully. Like, there is nothing about him that really tells me that's Bumblebee. Like, that is just straight up Cliffjumper right down to the correct horns, the correct shape to the helmet. They did a nice job. Like, yeah, like it took us a while, but we got a Cliffjumper that really does hit the mark for a Cliffjumper. I will say I wish the windshield was turned the other way, because I feel like the straight angle here should be closer to his chin, which would be a little bit more correct, but working with what they have. And also there's this very similar toy coming out that just got revealed at Toy Fair, so I guess they had to differentiate them somehow. Beyond that, all the red is still maintained. A lot of black now exposed, of course, because that is his primary color. Not a whole lot of new paint apps being shown here, because he is based on a G1 Minibot, so a lot of his deco is just straight up whatever the toy mold was. So beyond that, the proportion's pretty good. He has a bit of a clown shoe look, but I don't think that's really avoidable, considering he has to have his car mode go somewhere. So yes, part of it is the backpack, part of it is the feet. I think it's a decent enough job, and I've seen third-party do similar things to handle Cliffjumper's bulk when they're going for a more real-world accurate vehicle mode. And yeah, if you want a cleaner silhouette, you can just take that off, and then yeah, he looks a little bit more like his standard animation model with a couple of extra wheels stuck to his back, and that's pretty much, yeah. So let's talk about it. Yes, he part forms. Now, I went back and forth on this a few times. Now, Hasbro will tell you, well, plug it into his arm or his hand, and it's a shield. I personally find that to be one of the laziest things you can do. Just say a panel is now a shield, because it doesn't really, transform in any way like a shield. It's just, there's no way for me to look at this and go, that's a shield. No, it's the back of a car. I can't really do anything about that. If it transformed, it needs to transform in some way in order to convince me that it is what you tell me it is. Otherwise, yes, it's just a chunk of his car. Now I got to thinking about this, and part forming is not a new thing. We've been doing it since G1. We've been doing it since year 1. I can remember things like Classics Grimlock, where his entire tail comes off, and then you just stick it in his hand like a weapon. Difference is, it actually looks more like a weapon than this does, but it is still a huge chunk of the figure that they are just removing, so they don't have to bother engineering something else. So that's... It's disappointing. It's disappointing we waited this long for a Cliffjumper, and we have, the part forming going on. But that said, everyone's going to respond to it differently. Some are going to say, yes, it's a shield, not a big deal. Transformers have had, removable parts become weapons and shields all the time. And then others are like, okay, well, that's a huge chunk of the vehicle. They should have figured out some way to transform it. I think if it was optional, I wouldn't have any issue with it. If it could transform without ever removing it, fine, but that's not the case here. So yes, it's frustrating, and it creates a lot of drama because everyone has a different view about it. So you just make your own conclusions. I personally am not a fan of it. So articulation time. We have the head, which is on a ball joint, so it works all the way. Universal shoulder joints, bicep rotation, 90-degree elbow, wrist rotation, waist joint unrestricted, universal hips, thigh swivel, which is actually pretty high up, all things considered, knee joint, ankle tilt, tons of range of articulation. So nothing there is really hurt. He's small, but he has all of the articulation you expect from the War for Cybertron trilogy. And also for additional parts, 5mm ports here toward the legs. You have more here on the forearm. You don't have it on both sides. For some reason, it's square on this side, and it doesn't fit a forearm. It's kind of weird. Oh, I'm an idiot. TJOmega's a freaking idiot. Didn't notice he had the arm backwards. Yeah. I kind of deserve that one. Yes, you have a port on both sides. You also have 1, 2, 3. Where's the other one? Right there on his thigh. 3 little ports for attaching effect parts, because apparently everyone wants to shoot Cliffjumper, and given the reaction to the part forming, yeah, it looks like it. Okay, let's talk about the cannon. So the cannon, if I can just quickly rearrange this and put it back together, because this review is running really long, because we've had a lot of interesting things to talk about. And by interesting, I mean things that get people really fired up and angry, and I don't want that to leak into the comment section. let's put this cannon back together, and we will put it in his hand. So this big bazooka, this is the weapon he used in G1, and it's something I suggested. I suggested in the video, in the top 10 video. I would love to see a Cliffjumper that came with that bazooka he used. Here it is. I do love that they came up with a different way to use it. Both sides do have their own 5mm pegs, so you can actually have like twin like hand cannons out of it. So you do get a little bit more use out of it. That's a cool little touch. And it's kind of significant because this is the cannon that fired the first shot of the Autobot Decepticon war on Earth. This is the gun that reignited the war. And if Cliffjumper's aim was better, it would have ended it. So there's historical significance to this big cannon. So it's actually kind of cool that it finally showed up in a Transformer line. So that, my friends, is Cliffjumper, and I will leave a lot of this to you because, yes, he is small for his price. He does a lot thanks to his cannon, and depending on how you feel about the shield, you could argue he does a lot more and has some more options than even some of his other larger Earthrise Deluxes. Personally, I don't feel like it does enough to justify the price. He does feel too small. I don't like the part forming. And yeah, like there is a lot of happiness in me that Cliffjumper got a new toy, and the toy itself is good. It's just more expensive than it needs to be for what it does, or it doesn't come with enough, or it doesn't do enough to justify the price. I'm very torn on the figure. As it stands, I know it's going to be one a lot of people look over or are going to be really hard on, and it's not entirely undeserved. So in this case, I'm going to leave it to you. If you need a Cliffjumper that bad, we're probably not going to get a better option for a long time. And the toy itself is good. It's just a matter of, is it worth $20 to you? And that is a question you have to answer.